My name is Dolin. I am the president and founder of Educational Connections. And this topic of college admissions is really, really close to my heart because I have two kids with ADHD who both went through the college process. The good news is we have some solutions for you because we know that there is absolutely a college for everyone. And fortunately, I have an expert in the house with me today. I want everybody to meet Renee Minnich. Renee, hello.
Good morning. Actually, good afternoon. Thanks for having me today, Anne.
I'm glad that you're here with us. So a bit about Renee. She and I work together here at Educational Connections. She is a college consultant working directly with kids day in and day out. But she comes from a background in college admissions. She was the Senior Associate Director for Admissions at Rochester Institute of Technology, also known as RIT. And there she worked for 28 years, reviewing thousands of applications over the years. So she knows from an admission officer standpoint what it takes to get into college these days. So Renee, I'm glad you're here. Tell us a little bit about developing a timeline and when possible, starting on the earlier side of things.
Absolutely, Anne. Thank you. I kind of want to start at the beginning and just say it's completely normal to get pushback or procrastination from your child about starting the college application process. This can happen with any student because it is intimidating at times and it can feel overwhelming. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't excited about the process. And sometimes just adding in an outside counselor like me can really change the tide of the college admissions process. I'm here to help by setting up a timeline, specific time set aside to talk about the college search, and also to make sure that everyone sticks to a timeline and stays on track. Ideally, I like to remove the stress and even make the process enjoyable. It's interesting. And the first family that I worked with at EC was actually a student who had ADHD. And I remember her mom gave me the biggest compliment at the end of the process. She said to me, once you started helping us, we became a team of three working on the process instead of her and I being on opposite sides and kind of battling through the process. So that's really what I like to do. Ideally, I like working with a student as early as possible. But for the parents of juniors who are on this call, you should not worry. This is a great time to get started, and we have plenty of time to fit in everything that needs to be done without feeling overwhelmed.
Awesome, Renee. Thank you for that. So I know one of the things that you do with students is to help them identify their strengths and their challenges too. But sometimes kids, when parents call our office looking for help for the college process, and we talk about the child, they won't really know what that child's strength is. And then when you ask the child, they think that they're kind of an average student. How do you pull that out?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing I do when meeting with a new student is just to sit down and learn more about them. I have a meeting with a student today, just like this, where I'm just going to spend an hour with them. And I have a whole list of questions that I go through. And that usually kind of breaks the ice a little bit. I'm asking them questions about themselves so they know the answers to them. And what they might find to be very commonplace sometimes can be very unique, or they have a unique take on things. So I ask the parents or caregivers to join these meetings as well if they like to, because they often can offer me insights as well that maybe the student doesn't feel comfortable bragging about or they don't think is as important or significant. And I learn so much in these first sessions. It's a great building block for me working with a student going forward. So I can tap into their strengths and also maybe identify things that they say, like often I hear, I'm really worried about the essay. I know I'm going to struggle with that. I'm not a strong writer. So I know that I need to set aside time to work with them on that so they can feel confident with the things that might be challenging for them. During a lot of these conversations, I find great essay topics. So I'm always like making a little note as I'm learning more about them, and then can refer back to that later on. We get to a point where we're going to need that to add that information in.
So you kind of mentioned that there is a uniqueness about every student, but how do you uncover that? How do you get to that?
Sure. Every student I've ever worked with in all of my years in admissions and college counseling has something unique about them. It could be a talent, it can be an experience they had, a passion for something. I mean, there's so many different possibilities. So I really try to work with them to draw that out, to find their strengths, so that we can position them to stand out in the college application process. In the past, colleges were really looking for these super polished applications where students were very, very strong. Now they're really looking for students and learning like who they are, what are they hoping to do, what will they be bringing to campus. So we really term this the college narrative. And so what I do is talk students and learn about their backgrounds, learn about the things they're passionate about, the experiences that they have, and then we package that into a college narrative so that we're presenting something that's really unique to college campuses that will stand out against others who may look similar to them academically.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Renee. Can you think of a student who came to you that felt kind of average and you found something unique that maybe they didn't think about?
I have a student that I'm working with right now who's he wants to be an actor. So he's like, there's a million actors out there. How will I stand out? What will that look like? And so for this particular student, he also had a passion for the health sciences. So we talked a lot about that, and he ended up just randomly saying to me one day, I kind of see surgery very similar to acting. Like you have to memorize a lot of things, you have to draw on your history, you have to play a role. And like right away, I could see him light up. So we ended up, even though he's going to be submitting auditions, his essay isn't just about acting, it's about how he also has a love for health sciences and surgery. So that is going to stand out and be really unique. As opposed to all the other students who might be writing about their backgrounds in acting and performing.
Wow, that's pretty cool. All right, thank you for that. Okay, so let's switch gears for just a moment and talk about how to build that college list, because especially with kids with ADHD, it can't be just the brand name schools. It really, really has to be about the fit.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that when I'm working with students, many of them come to me with two things. One is either a list that's the same as all of their friends' lists. And then two is a very top heavy list. So I'm going to address both of those. So, students will kind of get colleges on their list that their friends have or they hear about or they think are really good fits. And, the important thing when you're looking at colleges is that you can't compare it to your friends. They're looking for different types of schools. They're looking for different academic majors, and they may need or want different things in a college. So we explore that together, and then we make sure we build a list of schools where a student can thrive and also get the support that they need. And then the other side of things is that many students come to us with a list that we call a top heavy list, meaning a list of schools that are all very competitive for admission. So I really help to make a balanced list where we have schools in the reach category, the match category, and the likely category, so that we have explored all different types of schools and to make sure that we have a good admission probability in some of the colleges that are on the list. All students are looking for colleges that have their academic program that they're interested in, a campus environment they like, clubs, organizations, all of those things. But for a student who has ADHD, we also really want to make sure that they have the level of support at that college that they need to be successful in the college setting as well. So we've got a little extra layer in there that we want to make sure that we talk about and investigate together.
Renee, let's go there next, because there are different levels of support for kids with learning disabilities and ADHD. How does that
Sure.
work?
So when you're looking at colleges, I really find that they fit into three categories. The first category is probably the lowest level and the most basic, and really can work with many students who have ADHD, and that's just the accommodations level. And accommodations are really just adjustments or modifications that are made to the academic environment or the program that will help the student be successful. An example of this would be extended time on tests. In college, we also see a lot of requests for priority seating in the classroom, especially if there are some bigger classrooms, they may want to be up front. And then you move on to a service level, and the service level really goes beyond the basic accommodations and provides more personalized or more frequent support. And these can be more ongoing and more intensive than just accommodations. An example of this might be regular meetings with a disability service coordinator, organizational skills training, time management support, study strategies, things like this that are a little bit more intensive. Some colleges will provide this with the cost of tuition, and there's an unlimited number of spaces available for these. And others may have an additional cost above and beyond tuition, and they might have a limited number. So once we get into the service levels where, we really start looking at, do we need to make sure that we are looking at things early and applying for them early? And then the last level is the comprehensive program. And this is really where it's a very extensive level of support for students. And it might combine a combination of academic support, social support, career focused support, like looking for internships, or it might be designed for students who might have significant or complex disabilities that they want supported. So this is really a more comprehensive program. And I would say the majority of the time, this is something that would be an add-on to the cost of tuition, and there would be limited number of spaces available. So if a family's looking for this type of support, we really want to make sure that we're working together to investigate, are there deadlines to apply for these, how many spaces are available, and what types of things need to be submitted in order to qualify for that level of support.
Okay, awesome, Renee. Thank you for that. If it's okay, I'd like to shift to the application itself. And one of the questions we often get from students is, should I submit my test scores? Should I take the SAT or ACT? Tell us about that.
Sure. The landscape for testing has changed dramatically since 2020. So, and it's still continuing to change. So this is something that I work on really closely with students through the process. I encourage every student to take the SAT or the ACT. There's certainly a lot of test prep available as well through EC. You can get test prep too. And, when students are applying to colleges, they should at least have taken the test twice, and at times 3 times, just to see what the scores are going to be. And then we can determine together whether those scores should be submitted or not. So many colleges are still at test optional status, so you can decide whether you want to submit your test scores. And there definitely are times when I encourage students to submit them. If their grades are lower day to day and their testing is higher, it can show a potential to be successful in college. So I will, typically encourage students to submit those. And then if their grades are strong day to day and they've also done well on standardized tests, it's another layer of positivity to their application. So I work with each student to look at their testing and how they've done on it, and then determine individually for each college whether they should be submitting them. So there's a little bit of strategy there, and it really depends. There's really not a clean yes or no answer here. It will really depend on the student, their scores, and which colleges they apply to.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Renee. And it used to be that we'd say, definitely go with the ACT if you have accommodations like time and a half, because the hard part of that test is like the pace at which you have to go, whereas the SAT is more dense. But the ACT will be changing to
Yes,
right in September. And so that's another factor, depending on the grade your child is in, it's another factor to consider those
absolutely.
the
Yeah,
ACT.
good
All
point,
right.
Ann.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the other things in the application in addition to perhaps testing, and that includes the essay. You touched on this. There's a main essay in the Common App, and there are also other ways to convey information. Tell us
Sure.
about that main Common App essay.
Sure. Well, Ann, the essay is one of my favorite parts. I love working with students on essays. I love editing them. I love learning about them. All my years of working in college admissions, everything was so numerical. GPAs, SAT scores, ranks in class. And the essay was just where I found out who the student was. I absolutely loved reading it. I always read the application first and the essay and the additional information section before I even looked at the transcript, because I really wanted a holistic view of who this who the student was before I moved on to that. So, it's this free space for the students to share who they are, what they want to become, what they're going to bring to campus. And, I work with students, as I said earlier, to draw out these topics, because sometimes the hardest part about starting is actually picking what they're going to write about. So when by the time we get to that part, which I like to do early in the summer for all the students that I work with, their Common App essays are 99% done before they go back to school in the fall. Because who wants to write a big essay like that while you're trying to also enjoy your senior year and do all of your other senior year coursework? So I work on them with students through the summer. And first we decide on a topic, and then we do some bullet points together, and then I send them off to do their drafts, and they send them back, and I do some editing until they really get to a point where they feel confident in what they're presenting to the admissions office, so it would stand out positively to them. Definitely one of my favorite parts of the process.
We talked the other day about choosing a topic, and you had some good insight. You said sometimes as an admissions officer, you see a lot of the same things,
Yes.
but you can write on a similar thing, but you can change the direction.
Yes. So, there are certainly some common themes that we see in students wanting to write about. And if a student brings up a common topic that I've heard all the time, then I try to steer them in a direction that will at least make them unique from those other essays. So a great example is, I worked with a student who was applying for a physical therapy program, and he wanted to write about his sports injury that took him to physical therapy, and that's how he got interested in it. And I would say, when you're looking at a PT program, this is probably 75% of the essays that you read. So, I dug a little deeper and I said, okay, well, what happened once you decided you like physical therapy? What happened from there? And then he starts telling me a story about how he talked to the physical therapist about it, and then he got a referral for them for an internship where he could shadow at a different physical therapy office to learn something new and different. And I said, what did you get out of that? And so this whole conversation kind of evolved, and he ended up writing the essay about his internship, not about the sports injury that led him. So it just, we had a little bit of information in there about the injury, but it really kind of spawned into, this is how I went above and beyond, and this is how I am different than everybody else who's applying to a PT program. So it really sometimes it's just a conversation and drawing out those unique pieces or learning a little bit more about them. Or if I'm able to work with a student early enough, I'll say, okay, here's your experience. Now, what are we going to do with it from here? Why don't you try to get an internship this summer? Why don't you do some shadowing? And so I can kind of steer them into a direction to learn a little bit more. And that might end up being the essay topic.
That's awesome. Thanks, Renee. Sometimes kids want to write their essay about their ADHD or perhaps their learning disability. And it kind of
Yes.
brings us to the question of, well, first of all, does a student have to tell the admissions counselors if they have ADHD? And should they even disclose that in the first place?
That's a great question, Anne, and a question I get asked a lot from families. And the decision to disclose is really a personal one. It really depends on you and your comfort level, and you're never required to disclose that as part of your application process. I will tell you honestly, though, in all my years of admissions, every time a student has to disclose it to me, and it's always helpful. Helpful to know maybe when they were diagnosed, what changes were made after, especially if I see a student who was diagnosed late in junior high or high school. I can often see a real change in the tide of their grades. And if I don't have an explanation, then I start to wonder, okay, well, what happened in ninth grade? Were they just struggling? Were they not concentrated? Did they not care about school? But if a student says to me, oh, I was diagnosed in ninth grade, and then I'm like understanding what happened. So it really is more of an explanation than an excuse. Absolutely. Um, and there are really different ways that you can disclose it. On the Common Application, you have your Common App essay, and then there's also an additional section called Additional Information. And you can write anything in the additional information spot. So I typically encourage students to, if they decide to write about their ADHD, to put that in the additional information spot. Because if they use it as their Common App essay, they're kind of taking away a space to share something else about themselves. So if they want to write their Common App essay on, whatever they feel passionate about, and then use the additional information section to be able to share information about their ADHD, then it gives them two opportunities to share with the admissions committee instead of just one. We
Makes sense.
also see sometimes counselors will disclose it in their recommendations, and I know that they've worked with the student to make sure that that is okay. And that's certainly always welcome as well. As an admissions officer, my preference was to hear it from the student because I felt like I got a little bit of a bigger picture, as opposed to the counselor who might only share it in one or two sentences as part of their recommendation or reference. So that's an option as well. But, as I said, it's really up to the family and the student to decide if they want to disclose it.
That's really helpful, Renee, because that's always a big question students ask. And by
Sure.
the way, everybody, we're going to go to Q&A in just a moment. So if you have a question about anything we've talked about so far, please pop it in the chat and we will get to that in just a moment. All right, so I think I'd love to end with Renee, something that occurred to me with my own kids and also lots of other kids we've worked with over the years, that this period of college applications is incredibly taxing on kids. And I think it's like the time in their lives that their executive functions are most taxed than at any other time than their K to 12 experience. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you could talk about the impact of that issue on just getting things done.
Sure. I mean, and you're so correct. This is probably one of the most stressful and overwhelming times that a student has at that age. But by breaking down the process into these manageable steps with mini goals and catering the plan to each individual student's needs, we can really minimize that stress. A timeline is so important, and everyone's timeline will look different because they're starting the process in a different place, and they may have accomplished some things or not accomplished some things. So when I'm working with students, what I'll do is say, okay, what have you done? Some students have done some college visits, some haven't even started building a list of colleges. So once I know where they are, I build a really fine timeline that can help minimize the stress. And make sure that we keep on track. Every student needs something different from me, and I try to work with them. Some of them like a reminder in the middle of the month of what needs to be done, and others, just want to kind of go off on their own and see me. I usually like to set up regular meetings with students and assign a little bit of homework in between each of them so that they stay on track with things. And as a college counselor, I also really want to make sure students are considering schools that would be the best fit for them, but also find a place where they're going to be happy and supported and successful, because that's really the end goal here.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And we're happy to help your child. If anything Renee mentioned this afternoon that would be helpful to you, we would be more than excited to work with your family. We have programs specifically for younger students, and those are kids in 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. We have another program for juniors. And then we also have a Senior Express program for kids that are in their senior year. And you can learn about all of our programs on our website, which is ectutoring.com. And at the top, you'll see a tab that says College Counseling, and you can drop down and see everything we offer. And then there's also a separate tab that's just for kids with ADHD. So take a look at that too. We're happy to talk to you about the needs of your child. You can scan this QR code or schedule an appointment, and one of our program managers will give you a call and talk about what's going on. And Renee, thank you so much for being my guest this afternoon. And I understand that you have availability for a few more students.
I do. I have availability for a couple more students. So if anyone's interested in working with me, I'd love that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. I hope that was helpful. We'll send a follow-up email to all of you tomorrow with the recording. Have a great day, everybody. I wish you all the best. Bye-bye.